it's funny because I feel like in some ways I relate like to that wanting all of the things, but it's just so repressed, you know. But I completely understand that. I always say it took me 40 years to realize, oh, you actually can't do and have everything. Like you have to make a choice at some point. It's like, I mean, finally, when I was 40, it was like, oh, I have to let go of some things.
Yeah.
I was thinking this weekend we were in a retreat and someone had this really interesting idea, and all of a sudden I had this whole novel about this idea. Uh, and I realized, yeah, I don't have time to do that, but I put it in a folder called art and writing projects, right? It still exists, and it would be great to be the person who had the time to write that novel, but I am not that person at this point. Maybe I will be later. Yeah. Yeah, it's like don't throw away your dreams just because you don't have time. Uh, yeah, yeah. Get a box, like a little box with jewels on it, where you can keep your dreams. Jealousy and envy are like, yes, jewels,
Precious item.
precious thing.
That's funny. I was thinking about envy in the context of like what to look forward to this year. Like, oh, what is my envy saying? And my envy is like, don't bother.
Oh, yeah.
Who knows?
Oh. I'm also thinking about how we turn into monsters and also, idols, wealthy people, the lifestyles of the rich and famous, but also um, we show in movies many times wealthy people are just unaccountably evil, right? And they control everything. But yeah, wealth is looked at as a what would you call it? Like an award in and of itself. Just money, 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 and not how did you earn that money? What does that
I
money do
know.
for other people? How does that, bring more beauty and justice to the world? It's just like money.
I think you're hitting on a really important point of the I guess the greed part of envy, right? When it's like it's never enough,
Yeah,
right? And so the money that's never going to be enough because money is just a means. It's not an end.
yeah,
Money doesn't give you anything, right? Like if
yeah,
you have stacks of money around, like I don't even know what that would. It doesn't really seem like it would feel like anything because money doesn't do anything, right? I mean, it can bring you things, it can take care of your needs, and that's what it's really about. And I think that's what a lot of people are missing the point of when they see this kind of opulence, and they're like, oh, I know it takes money to do that, so that's what they focus on. So kind of like looking at the or like what missing the forest for the trees.
yeah. I was thinking about the difference between owning a house and renting it. And when you own a house, the house owns you. It's very expensive to own a house. You would think, oh, I'm saving so much money. But there were times between houses when my husband and I would be renting, and we're like, this is so easy. And we would go past the hardware store where everyone was buying like little plumbing things for their house. We're like, see us, suckers. But the whole idea of owning and you realize that the house owns you. Like, you lose your ability to move freely from place to place, and um, yeah, owning things and having lots of money is its own kind of work. And if you have lots of money, now you have to manage the money and you have to pay taxes on the money. Like it. There's no free and easy way out.
Is it kind of a trap?
Yeah, yeah.
right? And maybe you're choosing those boundaries or those limitations. You're like, oh, I'm going to have a house and no projects every weekend, right? And maybe you like that. And maybe you're like, oh, I can't travel.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, an entirely new heater. How much did those cost?
Oh, yeah. Or I've got a raccoon living in my basement.
Look, there's bats. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm wondering about what envy would look like in a non-capitalist culture,
Hmm.
right? Capitalism is so much about having and buying and putting a price on everything and being productive or you're not valuable. What would it look like in a non-capitalist culture?
It makes me think about boundaries again. I feel like it's, where is your center? Like in a more kind of community based culture, the center is the community, and so your envy would look at the whole. Whereas in America, especially, we're very self-centered. Just no, without the necessarily bad connotation, just the pure truth of it. It's like,
Individual rather than
yeah, right, individually
Yeah.
centered. Yeah. So that's what our envy is focused on. But for some people, community is a value that is important to their self, right? And so there has to be a conscious shift there. And I know a lot of communities locally that it is very like their envy works to share and to, it's just it's a shift of the central focus, I think.
Yeah. I picked up an old writing journal of mine, and on the back there were names and numbers, people I knew at the time. I was like, what is this? And I used to dream that I would win the lottery, like millions of dollars. And the first thing I did was write down people's names and how much money I would give them. Like that was the first thing. So clearly I have a community
yeah.
focus in this capitalist world. I'm like, I get some money. It's like, what can I do for the people? Yeah,
Get it out.
that's strange. So maybe I've been working well with my envy in that way. Maybe my envy is more focused on community than on me. Although I do love jewels.
Just like any 3-year-old.
Yeah, I'm a 3-year-old. Sparkly.
To some extent too, though, yeah, it's like, we have to be able to engage with our envy and identify what it is we want so that we can make sure we have what we need. And then there is, I think, for most people, a natural kind of turn towards sharing and opening. It's like survival instinct kicks in if we don't feel like we have what we need, and understanding what that is really tricky in our society when we're constantly bombarded with, like, you need all of the things, all of the expensive things, and new things, and so to be able, even with that, to like really check in with your anger and your values, and to understand, no, these are what's important to me, this is what I actually need, and make efforts to, use the energy of your envy to help you get that, so that you can then, balance with the rest of the community on the larger scale.
Yeah. That just made me think of people who don't take care of their basic needs, but just go out and like do the instant gratification things. Like, oh, I had these meals delivered, and oh, I really wanted this Xbox, and oh, I can't pay my rent. Can you help me out? You're like, oh, geez.
How about no?
Do I have
How
to have
about
a
no?
conversation with you? Really? But it's like they don't even realize they have like no concept that they could be prioritizing differently, or that those things, perhaps it's just that those things aren't important to them, right? But then there's like a shame component that's not being activated there as well. If they're constantly asking for money for rent when they're still, going out to eat all the time, or doing other things that are more frivolous with their funds. But that's a question of priorities, I suppose.
That's a good point. the connection between envy and shame, which helps you understand how your behaviors affect you and others, that a person with good envy and shame would tend to pay the rent and right, and not be asking people to subsidize their going out to dinner kind of thing. Um, but that without shame, that, that like there's no shame helping you say, here's the boundaries of this behavior. I don't think you would ever have enough. I don't think you would ever have a sense of enough. That, you could have all the gold gilt mansions in the world and you would need another one. But you would never actually live in the ones that you bought.
You always be looking for more. Like, yeah, it would be an endless
Do you
black
remember the
hole.
story of King Midas and he turned everything to gold? Would you think that's the best thing ever? But he couldn't eat because whenever anything touched his skin, it would turn to gold, to metal.
Right.
So he was slowly dying of malnourishment. And I look at a lot of wealthy people here in the United States and like, yeah, you're eating metal.
It's true. I mean, they're so insulated, right? Like they're so afraid of losing their wealth that they have to insulate themselves from the outside world. And then, what do they have? They have these tiny communities of people that they trust, or maybe they don't trust. They're so afraid of like, losing what they have.
Yeah, yeah.
Yikes.
Poor King Midas.
It's tough to have that much money. I
What
mean,
if I could make him like a smoothie? We'd have to feed. We have to feed him with like,
open your mouth.
open your mouth here. I won't touch you. Dang.
Talking about the envy, kind of runaway envy. It reminds me, Karla, of that time when you took grief out of the emotion theater exercise, and how envy and jealousy became so prevalent, became so active. And I think just to come, to touch back again to the sadness and grief, if you need to have them in, access to the gifts of those two emotions, or and if you don't, that might be another reason why envy is just, I want this and I want this, and not prioritizing, and everything. So you have to be able to let go and to grieve what you can't have, or what's no longer working, and what's time to let go of.
Yeah.
It's like you've got no KonMari in your soul if you
Right.
can't grieve. Nothing's organized. You just pile up with stuff. I was also thinking if you've piled up with stuff, you can't access your envy and your grief. What is within your boundaries, which is the too muchness, it's too much to keep an eye on. I think your anxiety would probably kick up too because now it has too much to look, too much to figure out, too much to look at, too much to organize, too much to plan for. I think you could create a pretty strong anxiety feedback loop if you had, if there was just too much.
Right.
Yeah.
You'd never be able to focus either because it's like you're always overwhelmed, right? There's always something
Yeah.
else to do. So you would never,
Mhm.
it'd be really hard to prioritize and focus because there's too much to take in. It's
Yeah.
like, oh no, there's that, and oh, there's that, and I've never let go of any of it.
Yeah. I know hoarding is in and of itself. It's more like there's a neurological component to hoarding. It's not just a behavior. It's sort of they're 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 compelled to keep things. But I'm just looking at hoarding as sort of envy with no discrimination whatsoever.
Hmm.
Like when people will hoard newspapers, they'll hoard yogurt containers that still have yogurt in them and they're just over on the side of the house. Like there's no discernment whatsoever, no sadness and grief going, no, that's garbage. Yeah, yeah. Wow, envy's a big thing. It opens a
Connected.
Pandora's box full of jewels.
Thank you so much for this rich conversation. I feel like
Thank you.
a better friend to my envy now.
And it's rich, but it has riches for the listener. Therefore, we're doing good envy.
Karla, I'm going to quote you on that.
Why, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Angie.